This report discusses two cases about the social harassment and the social assault. The Petronas case is about an employee who was dismissed for harassment and inappropriate behavior. The court agreed that the dismissal was fair because the employee broke the task of the company. The Uber case is about a social assault claiming involving an Uber driver. Both cases are analysis using the utilitarianism and deontology. This case shows the importance of the workplace safety, fair action by the companies, and the company responsibility.
I will explain the issue summary and discussion part for the local case, which is the Petronas case involving Nik Hishamuddin bin Nik Mansur. The main issue in this case is whether Petronas had a valid reason to dismiss Nik Hishamuddin under Section 20, Subsection 3 of the Industrial Relations Act 1967. The court needed to determine two things. First, whether the misconduct allegation against him were proven. Second, whether the misconduct was serious enough to justify dismissal. For the background of the case, a female employee made an official complaint against Nik Hishamuddin, who was a senior manager at Petronas. The complaint involved several forms of sexual harassment and workplace bullying. The reported behaviors included using offensive and insulting language, staring at the victim in an inappropriate manner, and making unwanted physical contact. This action caused emotional distress to the victim and created an uncomfortable and unsafe working environment. After receiving the complaint, Petronas issued a show cause letter and conducted a domestic inquiry. The investigation found him guilty of several misconduct charges, and he was dismissed on 20 December 2018. However, Nik Hishamuddin denied all the allegations and claimed that the complaints were unfair. Despite this, the industrial court found that the victim's testimony and the supporting witnesses were consistent and credible. Therefore, the court ruled that Petronas had just cause to dismiss him because sexual harassment is considered serious misconduct that breaches trust and confidence in the workplace. It also emphasized that employees have a responsibility to provide a safe and respectful working environment for all employees. Thank you.
Uber is a global ride e-hailing company that connects passengers and drivers through a mobile application. In this case, a female passenger alleged that she was sexually assaulted by an Uber driver in North Carolina in 2019. According to the lawsuit, the driver touched her inappropriately and made a suggestive comment. As a result, she decided to take legal action against Uber. The main legal issue is whether Uber should be held responsible for the action of its driver. Uber argues that drivers are independent contractors and not employees. Therefore, the company claims that it should not be legally liable. However, many people believe Uber still has a responsibility because it controls many aspects of the service, including driver ratings, pricing, and access to the platform. Uber maintains that it is only a platform connecting drivers and passengers. On the other hand, plaintiffs argue that Uber has significant control over its service and therefore should be responsible for protecting users. This case is important because it is part of thousands of similar lawsuits against Uber, which may result in financial losses and reputational damage for the company. In conclusion, the Uber case highlights the importance of corporate responsibility and customer safety. Even if a company is not directly responsible under the law, it still has an ethical obligation to protect its users. This case reminds us that business success should always be balanced with accountability and public trust. That's all from me. Thank you.
This section discusses two cases about social harassment and social assault. The local case involves Petronas and an employee's misconduct at the workplace, and the international case involves the Uber and the social assault claiming against a driver. So the both cases are related to the safety and responsibility. The Petronas cases focus on employee actions in handling the complaint, and Uber case focuses on the company responsibility for its driver. So both cases show the importance of protecting the employees and users.
Next, for the application of ethical theory on local case, which is Nik Hishamuddin versus Petronas. First, we will look on the deontological perspective, which is the duty-based ethic heavily associated with Immanuel Kant. Under deontology, the morality of an action is determined by whether it adheres to established rules and duties, completely regardless of what the consequence might be. Kant gives us the formulation of the categorical imperative or universal law, which state that we should only act according to rules that we would want everyone else to follow. If we apply this to the case, sexual harassment can never be universalized. If every single employee in an organization engaged in this behavior, the professional environment would completely break down and cease to function. Therefore, the behavior is inherently unethical. Furthermore, Kant stresses the principle of respect for people, which is the idea that we must treat humanity as an end in itself, and never merely as a means to an end. By sending suggestive message and making physical advance, the claimant completely disregard the victim's dignity. He treated his subordinate merely as an object for his own narrow personal gratification, which is a direct violation of deontological duty. Next, for the second framework, which is utilitarianism or consequentialist ethics. This theory argues that the most ethical choice is always the one that produces the greatest good and the greatest number. It forces us to weigh the total harm versus the total benefit. If we look at the claimant, any benefit or pleasure he sought was entirely isolated to his own narrow personal gratification. In sharp contrast, the harm produced by his action was extensive. It directly shattered the victim's mental well-being, destroyed department morale, and put the organization's reputation at serious risk. From the utilitarian standpoint, Petronas had a responsibility to maximize the utility and well-being of the workplace. While it is true that dismissing the claimant caused him individual pain through the loss of his career, this individual loss is heavily outweighed by the collective pleasure, safety, and security given back to the entire workforce. Therefore, removing him was the ethically correct choice to ensure the greater good. Finally, to conclude this local case, the ethical justification of the industrial court to uphold the dismissal perfectly aligned with both of these frameworks. The court emphasized that sexual harassment is a gross misconduct and a legal breach. It reminds us that ethically, such behavior is an indefensible violation of human dignity and a toxic influence on collective workplace safety. That's all
So, in
from me.
analyzing Uber's international case, two ethical theories can be applied, which are utilitarianism and deontology. So, these two theories help us evaluate whether Uber's actions are ethical, especially in terms of user safety and corporate responsibility. So, firstly, from the utilitarianism perspective, ethics focuses on achieving the greatest benefit for society. Uber provides many advantages such as convenient and affordable transportation as well as flexible job opportunities for drivers. So these benefits have made transportation more accessible to many people. However, the negative impacts must also be considered. Cases involving sexual harassment and assault have caused emotional trauma and anxiety to victims, while also reducing public trust towards the platform. So if Uber fails to provide adequate safety measures, these incidents may continue to happen and affect more users in the future. Therefore, Uber should take stronger safety actions such as improving driver screening processes, strengthening monitoring system, and responding more effectively to user complaints in order to reduce harms and protect users. Secondly, from the deontology perspective, ethics emphasizes moral responsibility and the duty to do the right things. Companies must respect and protect their users. Even though Uber classifies drivers as independent contractors, the company still has responsibility because it controls the platforms and connects drivers with the passengers. Deontology also highlights the importance of accountability and transparency. So if Uber prioritizes business profits over user safety, it clearly contradicts moral principles. So Uber should handle misconduct cases more transparently and take proper action against drivers involved. So in conclusion, Uber's action in this case raised ethical concern. Both utilitarianism and deontology highlight the importance of protecting users. Therefore, Uber should improve its security system and internal policy because ensuring user safety is part of the company's moral responsibility. Assalamualaikum. My name is Wana Ali Alisha binti Haizab. My metric number is 305876. I would like to talk about comparison between local and international case on our assignment. The first one is legal system. For Petronas case, is handled under Malaysian employment law and industrial relation law. The industrial court focused on whether the employee was dismissed with just cause or excuse. Patronas are responsible for providing a safe and respectful workplace for their employees. However, the Uber case was more complicated. It is because it was handled under civil tort law, and the main issue was whether Uber could be held responsible for the action of their driver. It involved a third party instead of direct workplace relationship. The second one is type of liability. Petronas have a direct responsibility because the misconduct was happened on their workplace and committed by their own employee. Petronas had the authority to investigate the case and take action. The court agreed that sexual harassment is a serious misconduct and support the dismissal of employee. However, for the Uber case, the responsibility is indirect because Uber classified driver as an independent contractor instead of their own employee. Uber argued that they only provide a platform or system for transportation service. However, many people thought that Uber should still be responsible because the company control their employee with their system. The last one is company process and action. For Petronas, they follow a formal investigation by conducting a domestic inquiry, which is collecting witness statement and using the company code of conduct and business ethics. It showed that Petronas have their own clear internal rule and procedure for handling misconduct cases like this. However, the Uber case focused on more whether the company could legally be connected to the driver action. This case highlights the challenge of applying traditional law to modern business model like ride-sharing service. For conclusion and ethical lesson, the case of Petronas and Uber show a serious legal and ethical lesson about sexual harassment and sexual assault. The Petronas case showed that Malaysian employment law protect employee and ensure a safe workplace. The industry court agreed that sexual harassment is a serious misconduct. For the Uber case, they highlight a challenge in the gig economy because Uber classified driver as an independent contractor. It's making responsibility less clear. From an ethical perspective, business should not only follow the law, but they need to make sure safety, respect, accountability is protected. Company need a strong policy, clear procedure, and strict action against misconduct.